Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So, I have no idea why, but I have been reminded of somehow the story that was in the book Women Who Run with the Wolves called The Little Match Girl. And so this was really on my mind and heart yesterday. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because we had a really, really cold spell a few days ago and lasted, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. And it was, down in the south, it was a big deal. It was in the 20s at night. And I was just thinking about, all the homeless people and how I really don't even know how they survive that kind of weather. And, my mom and I were talking about even the little animals, and we don't know how they get through, but, she mentioned, God provides, and because we're thinking about the birds and the deer, and, it's just amazing, the extremes of nature and weather. And, but anyway, The Little Match Girl, if you're not familiar with this story, just a real quick review. It's about a little girl that, and come to find out, it was written, as far as I know, originally, the origin of the story came from the writing of Hans Christian Andersen, or Hans Christian Andersen. Okay, but the story, and there's different variations. The core essence of the story is that this little girl is made to go and sell matches. And her father is threatening her that if she doesn't sell her matches, like so many of them, then she will get a beating, right? So she's out in the cold, and she's portrayed as being very poor. She doesn't have any kind of covering on her head. It's snowing, it's freezing outside. She's wearing shoes that don't fit. And I think that it's no coincidence, or it's not coincidence, but I don't think it's random. I think that this is very symbolic. The shoes that she does have that don't fit are actually her mother's. So it's kind of like she doesn't feel those shoes. You know what I mean? I think there's significance there. And so she's out trying to sell her matches. She can't. Nobody's paying her any attention. Everybody's just walking past her, which is pretty typical, everybody nowadays just being self-absorbed. But she's freezing. And so she gets really desperate, and she decides to start lighting the matches literally for herself, to keep herself warm, because she can't go home. She knows if she goes home, she'll get beat. Okay, so she's striking the matches, and every time she strikes a match, it she has this hallucination of something really comforting and beautiful, like being in a warm, loving home in front of the fireplace, and she just envisions like this cooked turkey or duck of some sort, and it's just like this wonderful, heartwarming hallucination. And then the match goes out. The light goes out and it's over, right? And so she wants to bring that back, so she strikes another match, and she does this several times, and every time she strikes a match she has a hallucination. Meanwhile, it's describing, her cheeks and her feet and everything, her fingers getting turning all different shades of red and blue, and how she's essentially freezing to death during this process. And again, people are just walking past her like she's not even there. And so on her last match that she strikes, she she sees her dead grandmother. And she is just overcome with joy, because her grandmother is described as just being very loving, having always loved her, and she just feels like the ultimate comfort, right? I've got my spotlight on me again. Let me turn that down. So it's kind of a sad story, because she does wind up dying in the end, and she dies in the midst of this last hallucination where her grandmother, envelops her, just holds her in this warm embrace, and she, goes to heaven with her grandmother, right? So it's kind of like it's very sad on one hand, but then on the other hand, it's like a good story and a bad story. The good part of it is that she has been transported to a better place, right? If you have those spiritual beliefs. And so that's how it's portrayed. She literally leaves this cold and desolate and uncaring and cruel world, and moves on to this better place. with her grandmother, who loves her very much. So this was just on my mind, and I guess it's just like it's just such a striking story that makes such an impression on your mind and heart related to winter, you know, and just the harshness too of this reality and how we have to sacrifice ourselves, our time and our effort, and even our gifts, you know, our talents and our life force energy. All of that is just it feels like it's the message to us in this reality is that it's required of us to sacrifice that. It's like a self-sacrificial type energy in this reality, you know, just to make ends meet, just to pay bills, you know, through the system of money and all this. But I love to break down symbolism in stories like this, and so that's what we're going to do today. Because for whatever reason, like I said, this was just, it just came to me, and I feel like it came to me for a reason. I don't know, maybe there's something in the message that somebody is meant to hear. I don't know, but so first thing I did when it came to me was I just looked up on YouTube, you know, any other videos people have done about their take on what the symbolism is in the story. And I couldn't really find a lot. A lot of the videos I found were just where the story had been cartoonified, turned literally into a cartoon, different versions of it, and just sharing the story itself, and that was it. I found a couple of people talking about the symbolism in it, but it wasn't really anything more than what I've shared in the past. And I don't really know that I have a whole lot more today other than what I've shared in the past, but that's going to be a part of it. I'm just going to be kind of expanding a little bit on that, okay? So I looked up my own videos where I talked about this story in that book that I reviewed by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Women Who Run with the Wolves, because she talks about it. And what I found in my old video was where the book talks about the matches that she lights being symbolic. This is through her lens, right? The author of that book being symbolic of, you know, our creative attempts, you know, when we have this creative divine spark within us and we're trying to bring this forth into this cruel world, how sometimes the environment is not supportive of that. And so every time we're making an attempt to bring out our gifts, and it doesn't have to be art when I say creative, it can be any kind of talent or skill or passion that you have at all, even just your true nature. If your true nature is to be silly or funny or whatever, sometimes in the wrong environment, you know, if you have a family that's very rigid and cares about appearances and things like that, they may stifle that nature within you. So it can represent so much, you know, these matches. But that's what she was talking about, and how just that creative nature within us can be stifled if the environment is not conducive or conductive. I feel like that's electrical. I don't know, supportive, right? And I think that's very true. But there were a couple of things that stood out to me symbolically in the story. The first thing is that the whole reason she's out there in the cold selling these matches is because her father is making her do it. And remember, if she doesn't sell the matches, she's punished with a beating. So it's kind of like, what kind of father would do that to their kid, right? And so if you zoom out for just a minute, just pause, zoom out, and look at the whole picture, you realize that this story fits the same cycle or pattern of the hero's journey. Okay, again, some kind of ignorant pact with the devil that the father or the parent makes in the beginning, or either the parent dies, or the parent is either very ignorant or malicious, usually, with these kids, and then they wind up being orphaned somehow, and they set off on this journey where they're wandering on their own, and it's again through the woods, in the dark, through a fog or a mist, or in the middle of winter in the cold, you know. So there's a lot of struggles and challenges on this path, you might say, in the underworld, right? So same thing in the story. So she's, you know, sent out from her dad's house and put, you know, just thrust into this horrible struggle. All right. So in these stories, there's always helpers. We talk about that. The helpers are sometimes spiritual. There's sometimes literally like a spirit being, a ghost, an ancestor that comes to one in the spirit world and leads and guides the person and helps them that way. It could be a guardian angel. It could be an actual literal physical friend, a person, another character that they meet up with that they wind up being very close to in some way, or they marry or whatever. And then sometimes the helpers can be an inanimate object. That is very symbolic. So, like in Vasilisa, she has the doll in her pocket, who is her helper, okay, and talks to her, speaks to her. Excuse me, y'all. I'm getting better. So, I think my take on this story, Little Match Girl, is that the matches are her helpers, okay? And so, it's just that the way they help her in this story is a little bit unconventional. Um, so as the matches are lit, okay, and they burn away very, very quickly, and I think that's really important. But while they're burning, they are giving her a hallucination, which this is one of those things that can go either way. It's kind of like a neutral term, but depending on what happens in the experience, one's experience with a hallucination, it can either turn out to be really good and helpful for one's soul, even one's spiritual enlightenment and development and growth, or it can be detrimental and terrifying and scary and all this stuff. It can go either way. But as she strikes the matches and they're burning, she is given rather a hallucination, and the hallucination provides her with something beneficial, which is comfort. Okay, comfort. And that's really, if you look at the whole picture of her situation, that's what she needs. That is actually what she needs. Even though it's a hallucination, and even though her body is slowly dying and freezing to death, she is given comfort of these supportive and loving hallucinations of warmth. Okay? And so, I skipped a page in my journal here. Let's talk about the shoes, okay? So we talked about the father sending her away and how that's symbolic, and it fits the standard hero's journey, okay? I didn't hear anybody really dive deep on the concept of her not being able to feel her mother's shoes. She's out there walking in her mother's shoes, which are not. They're way too big for her. I think that that's not an accident. And again, I'm not saying that I can read, the mind of the author, the Hans Christian Andersen, that I'm just tapping in and I know exactly what he intended. But again, I think that higher truths, bigger truths, can come through a person as a vessel when they are creating or writing a story, creating a work of art, or whatever they're creating or writing, and that higher level meaning may even bypass their conscious awareness, but it gets captured beautifully in the end result, the art, or the writing, or whatever it is. And then it's kind of like, in the Christian Bible, how these big truths are wrapped up in parables. And so they're not meant for everybody to unwrap and understand, right? Okay. So I feel like what's going on. And so I thought, okay, I haven't heard anybody talk about her not feeling these shoes. Let me think about this. To not be able to feel the shoes of your ancestors, it's that right there is just heavily symbolic in itself. But what I was looking at in particular is that they were too big. And so there's this empty space in these shoes that she is not able, and it's kind of like they wind up falling off even. So it's harmful to her that there is empty space there on her journey. A lot of times the feet and shoes and things like that are heavily representative of our journey itself. And so there's something missing, right? Something missing. She's not able to feel the shoes. There's this empty space. What was explained in Women Who Run with the Wolves, and it's worth recalling, is where Esty says that our instincts can be hijacked and stolen and suppressed and I would even say lured and lulled away, as we're lulled to sleep in a brainwashed kind of state where we have been conditioned. Conditioning can do that to you. You become separated from your instincts. And so when you zoom out from the story and you see the whole picture, you understand that she could have likely prevented her own death if her instincts had been intact, because anyone with common sense would know I'm going to freeze to death and die if I simply just sit out here and just strike the matches and just hallucinate. There was a little bit of time in between each one where she still had her wits about her and would make a choice to strike another match. But there's so many other things. If her instincts had been in place, there's so many other things she could have done. She could have, I think there was another video that talked about this too. I only watched about, I think 2 videos really that talked about the symbolism of the story. If I can find them, I'll drop the links in the description. But if her instincts had been in place, then she would have gone into a shop, a store. She would have gone up to a stranger's house and knocked on the door and begged to come in and explained her situation or something. She could have found some wood and started a fire, found some kind of scrap material to build, an enclosure, a shelter, something to just kind of close her in. And so but that didn't happen. So her instincts, when you're thinking about those shoes she couldn't feel, there was something lacking, represented by their size and the fact that there's empty space there that she couldn't feel. So she is a child, okay? Which is why it's called the Little Match Girl. She's a child, and children, I think a lot of times we think, well, they just didn't know any better. As far as instincts go, I don't know. I think that's something that's automatic and typically in place, even in children. I don't think it's really something that has to be taught. I think that it's something that we're given. It's a God-given thing, but it can be taken away from us. And in her situation, I think that's what had already happened, even in her young life as a child, by having this abusive, demanding, threatening father, okay? Anyone who has been in a dominating, controlling situation knows that fear is driving you to comply. And so this other person's expectations are the only thing you can see. Your world gets really small. You become cut off from your instincts. And so it's easy for a lot of other people to judge and say, well, why didn't you just do X, Y, Z? Because that's common sense. Well, your common sense isn't working anymore. It's not working anymore. A lot of people don't get it if they haven't been through it, okay? So this is worth noting. I think her instincts have been injured. It's kind of like your common sense gets frozen, which I think that there's symbolism even in the setting and the environment of the story, this atmosphere being one that it's a freezing environment, because that's even a trauma response right there, to be frozen. Your cognition freezes up. You can't think straight. Your instincts are frozen. They can be thawed in a safe environment, right? When you're not under so much stress that you feel like every move you make there's going to be this consequence, and you're fear driven. In that situation, you kind of tuck those away, and then somehow you lose access to them. So, but yeah, so your instincts freeze up, because remember, her threat was a beating, and the matches became a temporary comfort. So what we see is she's slowly slipping away from her God-given place of power. Now, what is one's place of power? To me, it's when you are still whole. Your instincts are intact, okay? If you can recall, before a traumatic experience or before a toxic relationship or whatever you've been through that really rocked your world, if you can just recall how you used to operate prior to that, I bet you would say that the decisions you made, even in your day to day life, little decisions, just how you lived your life was kind of like a flow. It was natural. There wasn't any hesitancy. Um, you just you just lived, right? And then what can happen afterward is, and I want to caution you not to blame yourself, because I think a lot of times we're still kind of, there's remnants of being frozen up, okay? And it takes a while to unthaw. I just think these visualizations are helpful. They're so helpful for me, and so I have to share them with you all. But it's kind of like when they are thawing out. If they're not thawing out quick enough, and you haven't yet identified what really happened to you, you can blame yourself and be like, why am I not motivated enough? What's wrong with me? Why can't I get off the couch and get up and go get moving? Why can't I get more accomplished? Maybe I'm lazy. I've got this cut back here. It says lazy bones, because my grandma sometimes, if I would sleep in, like growing up as a teenager, I loved to sleep till noon, especially like in the summer when I was out of school. She'd come over and open that door. I do like this, but she wouldn't knock. She'd just open and be like, hey, lazy bones. And so it's just special for me. But you can just start thinking of yourself as lazy and stuff like that. And, maybe you are, and that's okay. But don't throw those labels on there and start judging yourself and make it a thing, and start, proclaiming that you have motivation issues and stuff, because it's likely, especially if you can think back to the past when everything flowed, you know what I mean? It's likely that you're still falling out. So, yeah. So there's this saying called out in the cold, to be out in the cold. And I thought there was relevance there too. So when one's out in the cold, they're, this is just off the top of my head. I didn't look this up. Okay. I think it's very symbolic. If you think about it, there's nothing about this poor girl, and her situation that, is supported in her entire environment. Not only is her dad very cruel and demanding, but all these people, even in her town, are just passing her by. They don't care. They literally just don't care. And here she is with her matches, whatever you want to see them as through your lens, representing metaphorically, whatever that means. She's just, just trying and trying and trying and striking these matches, and they're just burning out and nobody cares. So she is sort of kind of like in the wrong place. It's like it's not meant for her. And so the other thing I want to mention here is the difference. If we kind of put on some black and white thinking kind of lenses for a minute, okay, this will help. Let's just utilize that way of thinking on purpose for a minute. If you can categorize her environment and everything and everyone in it as just the total opposite of supportive, just very harmful and unsupportive and challenging and, resistant to her and everything. Then on the opposite side, this is the environment that is warm, supportive, loving, and everything else. And this is portrayed or symbolized in the story in the hallucinations. Remember, the story on the surface level, just physical material only, it's just sad. It's sad, and that's it. And remember, he wrote this, I believe, as a Christian. I'm not Christian. That was his name. As a children's story. It's kind of like, why would you want to tell this to kids? But if your children are raised understanding the symbolism and myths and fairy tales, then maybe that would be great. But if not, on the surface level, this is just a sad story. Why would anybody want to read it? But symbolically, we're splitting these two worlds she has access to through our black and white lenses, right? Symbolically, it all makes sense, okay? This is how we're going to wrap this up. Hopefully, it'll be inspiring to you. So, this her other world that she and she alone has access to is the hallucination world, where everything again is supportive and loving and warm and comforting. Um, to me, this is simply, if you just want to sum it up, I would say this. When our world has been shaken up, like Little Match Girl, and we go through the forest, we're thrust into the underworld, whatever it is, you're wandering, you're on the path, you're on the journey, you're, trying to figure things out, because now you're questioning everything, because you thought you knew this person, or you knew how things worked, or whatever, and then you found out you were wrong, and so then you question everything. That's usually what sends a lot of us on this journey. But you can start to feel, as more and more and more things are revealed to you, as you learn more and more hard truths about this reality, it can start to seem like what it's portrayed like in that story. And it would be really easy to just completely withdraw, and to your little hermit shell, and just cut yourself off, in your own little personal world, away from everyone else. But in the Bible it talks about, that the light is within us, and it's symbolized how, you're not supposed to hide the light, like, if I think it's symbolized as a candle in the story. You don't put that in a drawer and close it up or whatever. You're supposed to set it up and shine it. You're supposed to shine your light. We're supposed to be in the world. We're supposed to be in it. Okay? It's just the transition is to realize the reason why you struggled and were exploited and everything else is because you're not of it. It's not like really even a choice you make. I think it's just who you are. This is what I'm coming to understand. It's just kind of who you are. It's sort of like the wheat and the tares. It's like you either have a good, loving, honest spirit in you, or you don't. And so I think that when you have this spirit inside of you, but you don't realize that, it's not in everyone out there, because you think it's in everyone out there, because you just are looking so positively out into the world. That's obviously when you can get taken advantage of and all this other stuff. And then as you're starting to learn, and it's hard, then the world can start to feel really dark. Okay? At some point, there has to be this alignment. That's why I'm doing like this with my hands. It's like there has to be this alignment of your true nature with the right environment. And I'm not suggesting that it's heaven and heaven only. But to me, the right environment does exist here. But as of now, until the Garden of Eden is accessible, literally, once again, today, that right environment for one who has a spirit of love is kind of like what was portrayed in the matches. It is accessible, but it is another realm, like an overlay of another realm on top of this horrible realm. Now, a lot of people who are not in the spirit of love, or either they are and they haven't gone through their trials and stuff yet, their suffering and whatever, they may view this as fantasy. looking through all this through a logical lens, an academic lens, it's easy just to, say, well, that's all fantasy. That's a hallucination, see. But this is kind of like, in the Bible, it talks about the church. The church is not an actual structure, building. The church is us. It's the believers. And so when you talk about the right environment and just, trying to find, where's my home? Your home is in this spiritual structure. Okay? And and there are others there. But it's like you have to get familiar with it. It's like refamiliarizing yourself once again with, well, not even once again, but really for the first time. Because if you think about the concept of being reborn, when you're born, and even, I guess, reborn, think about what a baby has to go through, learning their whole entire reality. That's kind of like what we're having to do again. And so I share all this for this reason. This right environment for us, for you, it does exist, but it's not out there, which is heavily captured in a wonderful way in this story. This place, this right environment for you to to not have your flame go out constantly, and to spin your wheels and all that. It's an intimate place in your heart, okay? And so just think on that. Think on that, pray about it, journal about it, okay? So the good thing is, I was talking in my last video about learning what peace feels like in your body. And I think that's really critical enough for me to mention again, okay? Because this is part of that. It's kind of like finding that within yourself first, this spiritual home within yourself. And peace is a big part of that, okay? That's why I bring it up again. Now, when you find your place of peace, this is your place of power. And here's why. This in itself can serve as your discernment, because again, you're still in the world. You're not of it, but you're in it. So this is what I mean when you're still interacting with the world to some degree. When you can detect that there's something that's disturbing your peace, right? You can visualize like a little. It's kind of like when you identify what is disturbing your peace, it's a beautiful thing, and you don't have to say anything out loud. You can just identify it in your own mind. When you identify it in your own mind, you trap it. It's like enclosing it. It's like dropping a little trap right there on this little wild animal that's coming at you, And so when you drop that trap on it and it just kind of falls over on top of it, it's like a little cage, That's what happens when you identify, because it cuts it off. It now cuts off its access to you and preserves your peace just by identifying it. Just the act of being able to figure out what it is. You don't have to figure out why or what for or, anything else. Just identify it and trust that you don't even have to have the details to it. It really doesn't matter. If it disturbs your peace, then that's really all that matters. Now, I'm not talking about, sometimes, people who are sharing already that you have identified, share the same spirit as you, spirit of love. Those people sometimes can help you to grow by sharing hard truths with you. That's a whole iron sharpens iron thing. And in those kind of situations, that's going to feel uncomfortable. That may disturb your peace a little bit, but it's not going to disturb your peace really in the same way. So you'll get to be familiar with the difference there, and that will be crucial. So Yes. Consider your environment. Consider finding that distinction between being in the world but not of it. Maybe take that to heart and try to bring it out of the abstract a little bit and wrap your mind around it and cut yourself a little slack and understand that you likely have been frozen up in a lot of ways through all the stuff you went through, and so you may literally still be thawing out. Give yourself some time. It'll take some time, but also be very vigilant with your environment too, because that makes all the difference in the world. So I hope this has been beneficial. I hope it got the wheels turning. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.